The world's fastest keyboard just got smarter. This video sponsor SteelSeries just released the Apex Gen 3, delivering industry-leading speed, responsiveness, and customization, letting you instantly load custom presets depending on which game you're playing and set the actuation level for each individual key. It launched just yesterday, and you can get a 12% discount when you use offer code SKILLUP over at steelseries.com. Stick around to the end of the video to learn more. What's up, everyone? Quick disclaimer before we start the video. I'm actually in Tokyo at the moment for Tokyo Game Show, so you're going to hear some funky mic shit going on through this episode because I recorded some of it at home and some of it here, and it just sounds a bit wonky. So please forgive that. And secondly, the Assassin's Creed news that broke, that didn't make it in the script. So it's already a long video. We had to cut it off at some point. We will cover that next week. And same goes for the Xbox Showcase, which should have aired by the time this video goes up. But yeah, obviously we have to publish. So anyway, that's the show. That's what to expect. And here it comes. Gamers, how about that Sony State of Play, huh? You see that new Fortnite controller? Isn't it the ugliest thing you've ever seen in your life? Cast it into the fire, I say. Luckily, the rest of the show made up for it with tons of exciting announcements and reveals, like DLC for the Turtles game, and split screen for Lego Fortnite, and of course, the remaster we've all been waiting for, Horizon Zero. Sorry, I couldn't get through that without laughing. Jokes aside, not the best state of play that Sony has ever uploaded. It felt like a show reel full of updates and release dates, rather than honest-to-goodness announcements and reveals. Hell, the PS5 Pro section was basically a verbatim rereading of a presentation that Sony uploaded not 2 weeks prior. And if you've got time in the run sheet to shout out whatever the fuck this is, then you're probably reaching for at least a little padding. The show opened with some welcome news though. Astrobot is getting more content, and it's free. The update adds 5 new speedrunning levels and new bots to rescue, including those modeled on E from Stellar Blade, as well as the Helldivers. This update releases sometime later this year, no specific date. Next up, we have what I thought was the second best looking and most hype-inducing reveal of the entire showcase. Roll it, Stu.
You better be sure to keep your spark safe and burning.
While I was in the black, I had a dream. There was a monster in the woods.
This is Midnight Walk, and it comes from the team that put out the excellent Lost in Random a little while ago. This one is going in a whole new direction though, a dark, nightmare-fueled world rendered in claymation. The art design is honestly just unbelievable, plus it's playable both with and without a PSVR 2 headset. I think this looks amazing, and it immediately went onto my watch list. No date yet, but hopefully it's sometime next year. Something else that had a strong showing here was Hell Is Us, earlier revealed, but now we've got some actual gameplay. Take a look. I know people get a little sick of seeing Souls-esque action games, but I find the strike rate on them usually pretty good, and this one seems to have a nice vibe to it. Obviously, it all comes down to how well it plays though, and sadly there's no release window for this one yet, so we may be waiting some time for it. Metro Awakening VR is looking extremely good, like way better than your average VR release, and it's now locked in for a November 7th release date. Arcade Chronicles is a newly released melee action game. Kind of looks like if a Korean studio made The Witcher. It does look flashy, but similar to Hell Is Us. I'll reserve judgment until I get my hands on it. This one's coming out sometime next year. Palworld developer Pocket Pair are having a very, very rough week for reasons we'll discuss in the next block. But yesterday they had a very good day. They announced that Palworld was available on the PS5 right now. The game absolutely blew up on Xbox and PC earlier this year, so I expect some big PS5 numbers as well. The Luna games are getting a remaster, news that has thrilled fans of classic JRPGs. These games have proven difficult to get your hands on if you want an actual copy instead of just a ROM, so this should make things easier. Expect your typical visual and audio enhancements that you get with most JRPG remasters. Sonic X Shadows Generations isn't even out yet, and it's already getting DLC starring Keanu Reeves. It's a movie tie-in that adds a Tokyo-themed stage to the game, as well as Keanu as the voice of Shadow. It comes bundled with the deluxe edition of the game that also lets you play the game a few days earlier than its planned 5th December release date. Dragon Age The Veilguard. Okay, I feel like we should all just take a look at this trailer. Roll it, Stu.
Second detachment! Flank on the walls! Let's go!
Now to this point, I have not been very enthused by any of the Dragon Age Veilguard footage that I have seen. Even the recent round of previews, I looked at it and I thought, It just looks too pleasant, too airbrushed, too PG. This though, now we're talking. This looks dark and serious, and this is what I come to Dragon Age for. Sure, the Kunari still look absolutely terrible, but everything else here looks pretty cool. I know this game is getting endless amounts of hate, but I'm not in that camp. I'm also not in the fully bought in camp either. I'm cautiously optimistic, and this clip, more than any other to this point, has given me some hope that BioWare will come through. Not long to wait now, by the way. Valguard launches on October 31st. Alan Wake 2 is getting more DLC in the form of the Lake House. It kind of sounds like it's going to start Jesse from Control as the protagonist, which would make a hell of a lot of sense given how Remedy are approaching their world building and crossovers these days. This one arrives sometime in October. Hitman VR has been some of the best fun you can have while wearing a headset, and now it's headed to PSVR 2. That'll arrive sometime in December. Ladies and gentlemen, our next announcement is one I can scarcely believe. After an eternity of waiting that felt like time ceased to exist, a wait so long that it felt like unspeakable pain, burning with white-hot fire as we tumbled, writhing with relentless agony. The wait is finally over, and now, 25 years later, the coin has finally landed on its edge. Roll it, Stu.
Few know the truth. I stood with Kain and my brethren until I had the honor of surpassing my lord. For my transgression, I earned a new kind of reward. Agony.
The Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver Remastered Collection is real. I feel like this has been rumored for years now, but they've all proven false until this moment. When this reveal was first leaked, my Twitter mentions absolutely blew up, even though I'm not even on Twitter anymore. And look, I am very happy to see this, for sure. But as I've said many times in the past, while the world building, narrative, and voice performances of these games have aged very gracefully, their actual gameplay definitely has not. They play very, very badly by modern standards. They were so avant-garde at the time that they kind of predated the point where we figured out things like a decent control scheme in a third-person action game. Point is, if you're going into these games totally fresh, do expect a bumpy ride, but it really is worth it to experience the story and these characters. At the very least, it's nice to see this franchise acknowledged, and I hope it leads to a more ambitious remake or potentially even a sequel in the years to come. Quick shout-outs to indie horror title Fear the Spotlight, which launches on October 22nd, and the very impressive-looking co-op survival adventure game Towers of Agsbar, launching into early access in November. Dynasty Warriors Origins sees the series making a comeback after a bit of a hiatus. Earlier reveal, we got a good look at gameplay here, as well as a release date, January 17th next year. Speaking of release dates, Monster Hunter Wilds. We've seen a bunch of this since it was revealed last year at the Game Awards, and now we know when it's coming, February 28th next year. The same day as Like a Dragon, Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, more on that one later, and in the same month as Avowed, Civilization 7, and Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I prayed so hard for just one February that wasn't going to completely wreck my sleep schedule, and once again, those prayers were in vain. LEGO Horizon Adventures didn't blow me away when I played it earlier this year, but it did seem like a bit of lighthearted fun. Great to play co-op with the kids if you've got them. This one is now confirmed for a November 17th release. Sony hit us with a one more thing moment when they revealed the existence of the remaster that absolutely no one was asking for. Like, absolutely no one. Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered. And it's like, honestly, Sony, you are free to do whatever you like with your money, but honestly, like, do we really need this? Like, sure, it's got new character models and textures and new mocap during conversations, but it was fine before, except for the creepy looking child Aloy. That was definitely not fun. Point is, The Last of Us Part 1 felt like a stretch, but that was originally released on the PS3, and motion capture and facial animation technology has come a huge distance since then, to the point where I'd argue that the Part 1 remaster actually elevates the experience in a meaningful way, because so much of the game was about the emotion, about the pain on characters' faces, etc. Can the same be said of Horizon Zero Dawn, a game released in 2017 and that still looks more than fine today? I think not. And like, think about how many games would actually benefit from the remastered treatment, not least of all Bloodborne. And Sony's out here getting Nixus to work on this. It just seems like such a waste. But hey, like I said, it's Sony's call, so whatever. Mark Cerny then briefly returned to again say the things he had said a fortnight earlier, playing basically the same sizzle reel that we'd already seen. And then the show concluded with this reveal, which was honestly very, very good.
And now, every Ronin here is after you. Still think you're the hunter?
Ghost of Tsushima is in fact Ghost of Yotei, a mountain region in Japan that is not on the island of Tsushima. Speaking on the Switch Up, Sucker Punch said they were more interested in the idea of the ghost than they were in maintaining a connection to the previous protagonist, Jin. They also said they like an origin story, and the move to a new location gives them the chance to introduce a new ghost. And this is her. Her name is Atsu, and unlike Jin, she can dual wield katanas, and she's got a sick wolf companion. Nice touch, I love that. Am I bummed out that we're leaving Jin behind? Honestly, he was kind of the weakest part of the game, I think. Little more than a vehicle for a revenge and redemption plot. I personally am excited to see Sucker Punch take a fresh swing at their characterization here, but I've also seen plenty of people lamenting the absence of Jin, so I get that. Either way, it's great to finally see this game since we all knew it was coming and it was just a matter of when Sony would finally pull back the curtain. There's no date for this one yet, but it's scheduled sometime for 2025. And that was the showcase. Like I said, a lot of updates and release dates for stuff we'd seen before, and while a few of the genuinely new reveals were impressive, there weren't all that many of them. It does fold into the narrative of Sony having a tough 2025 while it waits for some of its bigger plays to drop in 2026 and beyond. By that point, of course, the PS5 Pro will be out, and so will the Switch 2, and GTA 6, maybe. It's a different world waiting for us then, but right now it feels like the industry is still catching its breath from the madness of 2023, and this state of play is a bit of a reminder of that. All right, we got one more bit of Sony news before we move on, and it's about Sony's biggest ever L, Concord. This week, the director Ryan Ellis stepped down from his position. Kotaku had the story, and they report that Ellis was too emotional to speak at points during the post-launch studio-wide meetings after it had become clear that the game was tanking. They also report that the studio is currently in a state of limbo while they wait to hear what Sony decides to do with both Concord itself and with the people who made it, since Sony bought the studio a few years ago. Quote, "It's still not clear what will come next," three sources told Kotaku. They are pessimistic Concord will return, and some have been asked to explore pitches for something completely different that Firewalk, which is currently around 150 to 170 employees, might work on next, end quote. The mood is reportedly pretty dire, and many people are not hopeful. Quote, "Others, however, feel like mass layoffs will be the most likely result of Concord's failure, including the possible shutdown of the entire studio, which studios tell Kotaku is one of the most expensive studios in the PlayStation portfolio on a per-head basis. Some developers are updating their resumes and portfolios, and a few have already preemptively exited the studio, and others are waiting to see what a potential severance package will look like before deciding what to do next," end quote. Moving on to non-Sony news, I think the biggest news story of the week was the one I alluded to earlier, and that's this whole Palworld mess. So we all remember when Palworld came out and completely took over, becoming one of the most concurrently played games on Steam and the most successful third-party launch title on Game Pass. Back then, all the chatter was around how much Pocket Pair had borrowed and repurposed Pokemon designs, with some of them being so one-to-one with their inspiration that it felt like Pocket Pair was almost daring Nintendo to sue them. Well, Pocket Pair clearly knew what they were doing because Nintendo did not sue them for copyright infringement, probably because they couldn't. What they can do, though, is sue them for patent infringement, and that's exactly what Nintendo have done. This week, Nintendo served notice that it intended to bring suit against Pocket Pair for infringing multiple patent rights. What were those rights? Absolutely nobody but Nintendo knows, not even Pocket Pair, the people being sued. They said as much in a statement, quote, "At this moment, we are unaware of the specific patents we are accused of infringing upon. It's truly unfortunate that we will be forced to allocate significant time to matters unrelated to game development due to this lawsuit," end quote. So this one is really complicated to unpack because patent law is basically the worst type of law there is. It's deliberately obtuse and confusing because that's how both the companies and the lawyers like it. The more complexity and ambiguity, the easier it is to assert your patent and seek damages. The general consensus from Japanese analysts and patent lawyers is that this appears to be a sort of lawfare that Nintendo are selectively waging here, likely in retribution for Palworld being so successful while clearly riffing on Pokemon designs and the whole Pokeball catch mechanic thing. Nintendo has hundreds of patents, and while it doesn't often assert them, there have been select instances in the past where they've done so in an effort to bring a competitor to heel. Again, we don't know for sure what this is all about as the details aren't public yet, but given just how successful Palworld has been, and given that Nintendo clearly couldn't get them on copyright stuff, this does seem like a likely explanation. We don't yet have any word on when this will make its way to court, or even if it will. Pocket Pair may choose to settle, or Nintendo may choose to drop the suit. No idea which way this is going to go, but I'll be sure to keep you updated. A quick lightning round to finish off. The Krafton CEO says he doesn't expect to make any money on Hi-Fi Rush 2. Quote, Although they did not have big success in their games, we saw many creatives worth pursuing. That's why we wanted to work with that organization, end quote. Love that, but I certainly wouldn't count Hi-Fi Rush out. That IP has a lot of love for it, and I think a sequel will do better than he expects. Netflix are keeping on that animated adaptations train for a little while longer. Arcane Season 2 launches November 9th, but in addition to that, Netflix announced an animated Splinter Cell series where Sam Fisher is being voiced by Liv Schreiber. Bit of a shame not to include Ironside, if you ask me. There's also a Devil May Cry anime on its way, but the best announcement for my money is that Cyberpunk is getting another animated series. No word yet on whether or not this is another Edge Runners, but if it is, I'm gonna guess it has a different leading man. And finally, Paul Tassi of Forbes is reporting that Bungie's Marathon will indeed abandon its previously planned free-to-play business model and opt for a $40 price tag instead. While this was a death knell for the likes of Concord, it's important to remember that Helldivers launched at this price point earlier this year, and no one complained about that. Plus, most extraction games like Tarkov and Hunt Showdown are premium products, so this actually brings Marathon closer to the industry norm. Tassi says we likely won't see the game until sometime in northern spring next year. A long time to wait, given this was revealed a while ago now. With everything going on over at Bungie at the moment, they really need to start getting some runs on the board sooner rather than later. So what got announced or delayed this week? Well, the biggest announcements have come out of Japan, which makes sense with TGS happening this week. Leading the pack is the next game from the Like a Dragon series, which is called, and this is the real title, Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. It's a side game that stars Kiryu's frenemy Majima as he becomes a pirate for reasons that absolutely do not matter, because Pirate Majima is simply a cool concept that does not require any explanation. It's set in Hawaii like Infinite Wealth, which makes sense as the studio is known for reusing and building on locations, but it'll also feature ocean exploration, ship battles, and dip back into the real-time brawling the series used to have. It's looking totally insane and awesome, and a hell of a lot more fun than Judgment. That's right, I said it with my whole chest. Come at me, RGG people. Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii is out on the 28th of February next year, a month that's already looking a little too stacked for my tastes. Here's one that no one saw coming. Cult classic PS Vita game Freedom Wars is getting remastered, which has just about every PS Vita pervert out there hooting and hollering. This was kind of a Monster Hunter inspired game set in a dystopian anime future. It was originally published by Sony, but for some reason they don't want anything to do with this remaster. I guess because the game is over 3 years old now, which means it's simply too old for Sony to remaster it. They've given the reins to Bandai Namco to publish it along with original developers Dimps. Dimps have also said that depending on how well this remaster does, they may want to make a sequel. It's coming out next year on January 10th. If you thought Like a Dragon doing the pirate thing was going to be the weirdest announcement of the week, you obviously didn't hear about the world-famous professional footballer Cristiano Ronaldo teasing his involvement in Fatal Fury City of the Wolves, the new fighting game from longtime Capcom rivals SNK. It's not the first time a world-famous sports star has been in a fighting game. That honor actually goes to LeBron James in Multiverses, and Shaq in Shaq Fu back in the day. But it's still really weird. I kind of wish it was a Mortal Kombat cameo, mind you. I think we'd all pay good money to see NetherRealm do some sort of football-themed fatality. Coming back to the West, sort of, but still sticking with the theme of remakes, it's been confirmed by a new trailer that Silent Hill 2 Remake, being developed by Bloober, will be a PS5 exclusive for at least 1 year. It's coming out on PS5 and PC on October 8th, and the trailer specified that it's not available on other platforms until October 8th, 2025. I don't think that's surprising given that we all kind of guessed this was coming and Xbox ports are looking fewer and further between these days. Still, it is a bummer for Xbox fans. Maybe grab it on GeForce Now or something if you're keen to play it at launch. Sega has locked down a release date for 2 Point Museum, the latest in their comedic management games. It's arriving March 4th next year. Shortly after that will be Tales of the Shire on March 25th. This is the Lord of the Rings life simulation based around hobbits. It was supposed to launch around about now, but the delay was announced last week and the date confirmed after a recent gameplay showcase. The previews coming in for this one are very mixed, to put it mildly, so no doubt Weta will be using that extra 6 months to hopefully lock this one down, as Embracer really expect big things. I think they will be hard pressed to get them if the preview commentary is anything to go by. EA has announced the next skate game will launch in early access in 2025. That's after the last few years worth of playtests where they say tens of thousands of players have jumped in. I'm hoping the skate audience is still there to justify EA investing big in this one. I know Stu will definitely be all over this thing day one. In terms of cancellations, Microsoft is cancelling PSVR 1 support for Minecraft on PS4. The ability to play Minecraft in VR came at a time when we were all itching to run around outside during the COVID lockdowns in 2020, but it seems like not many people have gone back since then. It's getting canned in March 2025, and it'll just straight up no longer work after that since subsequent updates won't support it. Also cancelled this past week was Disney Mirrorverse, a free-to-play mobile RPG that was kind of like Disney adopting the edginess of Kingdom Hearts but cranked up a few notches. That's shutting down on December 16 this year, and it also coincides with another Disney free-to-play mobile RPG RPG launching to take its place, Disney Pixel RPG, which launches in October. A PvE Dead by Daylight spin-off, which was codenamed Project T, has been cancelled. Behavior Interactive announced that the studio ran a playtest in July and were unsatisfied by the commercial risk assessment that came out of that. Not very flowery language there, but it gets the job done. Sadly, the studio making it a new outfit called Midwinter was closed, though Behavior apparently offered to relocate them all from the US to their Canadian studio, hoping all those affected land on their feet. And finally, Hood Outlaws and Legends has met the Sheriff's Justice. This live service PvP game launched to very, very middling reviews and never picked up any steam despite being given away on multiple platforms. The developers have just announced that the game will be shut down on February 18th next year, and because we as a society do not value game preservation, the game will be totally unplayable after that time. If you bought it in the month of September, you'll be eligible for a refund, but if you bought it before then, no refund for you. Please enjoy the handsome JPEG that will forever adorn your platform library. So what came out last week? Well, Final Fantasy XVI arrived on PC with a splash, and by splash, I mean various technical and graphical issues. With one example, I saw Clive trying to run through an increasingly expanding black hole. Overall, that seems to be a relatively small subset of people though, as the user reviews on Steam are actually sitting at mostly positive with over 3,400 reviews at the time of writing. So if you're still on the fence about this one, maybe dig into those negative reviews a little further to see if your specs might be a red flag. Star Wars Jedi Survivor also came to last-gen consoles last week. Not too many impressions online, but Gaming Trend reports that loading and compressed audio are basically the only things wrong with this port. You'll be waiting a bit more and see textures pop in when exploring, but that's about it. The game still looks pretty dang good, plays just fine, and is a very stable 60 FPS as far as my eye can tell, end quote. Quite a relief, though interesting to note that Digital Foundry just did a video on the latest PC patch for this game, and spoiler alert, it's still shit. The performance, that is, not Digital Foundry's video. Those guys rule. We featured UFO 50 on Put This On Your Radar last week. This is a collection of 50 original retro games developed by the creator of Spelunky, telling the history of a fictional game company. Stu and Ed couldn't stop playing this one, and they're in good company as it's sitting at a mighty 90 on OpenCritic, making it one of the highest rated games of the year. GameSpot gave it a 9 out of 10, a glowing review saying, quote, "Simply put, UFO 50 is an audacious triumph. Dozens of the games are compelling enough to warrant a full playthrough, and even some of the less successful experiments have some intriguing elements or inventive idea to draw you in. Best of all, it's exciting to have such a rich vein of strange, creative video game experiences to examine. This is nostalgia, but not the candy-coated feeling of reliving what we've already experienced. It's remembering how it felt to discover something new," end quote. Man, that is a great way to phrase that. Absolutely love it. Speaking of nostalgia, Broken Sword Shadow of the Templars Reforged is a remaster of one of the all-time great adventure games not from LucasArts or Sierra, and it's also managed to make a mark for itself almost 30 years after it first launched with a mighty OpenCritic score of 89. The gamer scored this 4.5 out of 5 stars, saying, quote, "Reforged has raised the bar to breathe new life into the game. It sets a new standard for how to make point-and-click more accessible in this modern day when players are less forgiving with their time and patience," end quote. Congrats to all the folks at Revolution Software for managing to maintain their legacy with this one. Capcom are masters of remastering at this point, and Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster is also faring pretty well in the review space, with a strong 80 on OpenCritic. Well Played gave this one an 8.5, saying, quote, "Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster does enough to warrant its existence, ensuring the original experience remains gleefully intact with new quality of life improvements and a lavish visual upgrade in tow. It may be not quite as deluxe as it could be, but it remains as good as it's always been," end quote. Enotria, The Last Song, is a summary Souls-like themed around Italian folklore, and it's kind of famous for its little spat with Xbox's indie publishing division. This one landed about where we all expected, a fair and nice 69 on OpenCritic at the time of writing. IGN scored it a 7 out of 10, saying, quote, "Enotria, The Last Song really tries to step outside the box when it comes to dressing up the standard Souls-like. However, the unapproachability of its RPG systems and the wonky performance when a smooth frame rate matters the most are what really prevent Enotria from taking center stage," end quote. Italian outlet Spazio Games was of the same opinion, giving it a 7.7, but gave a special shout out to its all-important Italian representation, saying, quote, "As an ode to the beauty and complexity of Italy, Jamia's title song rings out loud and clear right to the end, and that, all things considered, is more than enough," end quote. I thought about reading that in an Italian accent, but my rehearsals were so bad they made Jared Leto's performance in that Gucci movie look positively Oscar-worthy, so I decided to spare you. Moving right along to God of War Ragnarok, which arrived on PC last week courtesy of Jetpack Interactive. By all accounts, it runs pretty well, but it's getting plenty of flack on Steam for for including mandatory PSN account requirements, even though it doesn't have any online components at all. So it's just straight up data harvesting, which is why plenty of people are unimpressed. Its concurrent player count at launch peaked at just over 35,500 people, which is half of what the original God of War did back in the day. So perhaps a good chunk of those people who originally played on PC ended up buying a PS5, or they just haven't finished the game yet, or they're put off by the PSN requirement, or maybe it's a little bit of everything. Either way, the port is technically very sound, so if you're holding off a word on that, you can rest easy. Ragnarok is a truly incredible experience, and I'm very jealous of anyone who gets to experience it for the first time. Shout out to Aussie game Copycat, which launched to very positive reviews on Steam last week. This is that very emotional narrative cat game for those who found Little Kitty Big City a bit too whimsical. Checkpoint Gaming gave this one a 7 out of 10, saying, quote, "If you enjoy complex storytelling in games with challenging and mature themes, then Copycat is well worth your time. The emotional heart and soul of this game is enough to make the experience worthwhile," end quote. Frostpunk 2 has proved itself to be a most worthy follow-up, with its OpenCritic score hitting a mighty 85. PC Gamer gave it that exact score and said, quote, "As a city builder, Frostpunk 2 is a bit of a step down from the original due to the increase in scale, which unfortunately keeps the city at arm's length. As a society sim, however, it's every bit as engrossing as the first Frostpunk, like a tiny snowball rolling down the side of a mountain and eventually becoming an avalanche. Even the smallest choices can have major consequences," end quote. That retro Karate Kid game hasn't drummed up a ton of noise, but the game has scored it a 3 out of 5, saying, quote, "While Street Rumble does its best to have an identity, those attempts don't do all that much to make it stand out. At the end of the day, it's a fairly generic side-scrolling retro brawler with a decent Karate Kid coat of paint," end quote. The few Steam reviews there are calling it overpriced for what it is, and at $40 it seems like they may have a point. Cozy Castle builder and TikTok sensation Tiny Glade has landed at a fair 70 on OpenCritic, with PC Gamer saying, quote, "The raw materials of Tiny Glade don't really leave much room to imagine. All it makes me feel is, well, isn't this nice? Isn't this a nice thing for people who like nice things," end quote. It's yet to launch on Steam at the time of writing. However, this is one of the most wish-listed games on Steam, so no doubt it's already found its exact audience. Aria History Untold faced a very, very uphill battle when it chose to enter the 4X genre, a notoriously difficult type of game to make and a genre dominated by Civilization. Aria is unlikely to unseat Civ in that top spot, and it seems as though it falls a little short of what people were hoping for. On Steam, it's sitting at a mixed 54%, with many reviews pointing to a general lack of polish with things like visual performance, UI, and the all-important AI. Critic reviews are better, with the title sitting at a strong 76 on OpenCritic. God is a Geek, for example, scored this one an 8 out of 10 and said, quote, "From the gorgeous presentation to the layers of gameplay, I can't recommend this enough, especially if you're a history nerd," end quote. Personally, I find that when it comes to these sorts of games that user reviews are way more helpful than critic reviews, so if you're at all interested, maybe dig a little further into those Steam reviews to see what's up. And finally, Greedfall 2. Oh man, so I kind of warned about this one a few times already. I got super bad vibes when I played it earlier this year. It just seemed like a massive downgrade from the first game in every way. It's now launched into early access, and sure enough, the verdict is not good. On Steam, it's currently sitting at 45% mixed, with negative reviews criticizing the story, the voice acting, but in particular, the shift to real-time with pause combat instead of the straight-up real-time action gameplay of the first game. I like real-time with pause, by the way, big fan, but this was not a good rendition of it at all. Eurogamer agree. They put out an impressions article titled "Greedfall 2 Mystifies Me. It's currently a step backwards for the series," end quote. And in that article, they point to many of the things that I spotted when I first played it. This is an early access game, sure, and things will improve, but this is a pretty smallish project and a studio that's going through some very difficult internal struggles right now, and it's a publisher who's been pretty cutthroat in their decision making in the past. I do wonder if Greedfall 2 will make it to a 1.0 release. I guess we'll find out in the months ahead. Alrighty, so what's coming out this week? Well, Athena Crisis is a turn-based strategy game that's carrying the torch of Nintendo's Advance Wars, so much so that I'm worried it's going to get a cease and desist, or at least a patent lawsuit. But as of right now, it just launched into early access, it has PvP, and it's completely moddable. The initial user reviews are essentially saying that yes, it's Advance Wars, but with more features, so if you're a fan of that series, definitely take a look. Staying with spiritual throwbacks, Drive Rally is a really pretty looking indie game set in the 90s and inspired by the great rally games of the late 90s, like Colin McRae Rally. That's out in early access on the 25th of September. On Thursday, the 26th of September, things are particularly stacked, with The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom being the day's headliner. That's a sort of sequel to the Link's Awakening Awakening remake on Switch from 2019, only starring Zelda, who can summon lots of different objects to solve puzzles in the same world. I just played through this one. TLDR, this is a lovely, very dense, very clever, and very enjoyable title. I do think there was some scope to remix the Legend of Zelda formula a little more than the game strives for. Structurally, it's every bit the Zelda experience we've had dozens of times before, only now with a lot more focus on puzzle solving. I think this was a chance for Nintendo to go a little crazy like they did with, like, I don't know, Majora's Mask, for example, but straight battered that it is, it's still a great game and I hardly recommend it, even though it runs like total ass on the Switch. Joining Zelda is 2024's most dangerously addictive game, Balatro, which launches on iOS and Android on the same day. The mobile version is $10, which comes in slightly cheaper than the Steam or Switch versions, meaning this release is extra dangerous for everyone involved. It'll also launch into the Apple Arcade subscription service, so if you've already hooked into that, then God help you. Shadows of Doubt is that very cool procedurally generated immersive sim/detective game that had a really great run in early access. We featured this one last year, and now it's getting its 1.0 update along with a console release for PS5 and Xbox. That also arrives on the 26th. Still on the 26th of September, we've got Sea Smash VRS, which is the Sega-approved sequel to one of the more obscure Dreamcast games reimagined in VR. This is essentially a futuristic VR squash game set in space, and it's actually a ton of fun. It came out a while ago on PSVR 2 and Meta Quest, but it's now getting a non-VR release for PS5 that turns it into a third-person sports game, but it'll still let you match up with VR players, which is a nice touch. Hey, are you old enough to remember Worms Armageddon in high school? Well, Team 17 are putting out an anniversary edition of that game for consoles with quality of life improvements and the Game Boy Color version of the game as well. Very nice. And the last one for September 26th is Breachway. This is ranking at around 150 on Steam's most wishlisted list. It's a spaceship battling roguelike with deck building. Think FTL if a real serious strategy game developer had made it from scratch. Moving on to Friday the 27th, we've got EA Sports FC 25, which by the way is now M-rated in Australia thanks to the new rating laws that affect any game with loot boxes or gambling mechanics. Way to go, Ultimate Team. If soccer isn't your jam, then maybe something in Looney Tunes' Wacky World of Sports will work for you. This is a collection of sports and minigames with Bugs Bunny and friends that includes soccer, basketball, tennis, and golf. Obviously chasing those Nintendo sports game highs here. That one's headed to all platforms on the 27th. On the 30th, we're getting the first big Starfield expansion, Shattered Space, which adds a bunch of new stuff, focuses on the faction with the Snake God or whatever, and its flagship feature is a little buggy that you can drive around on the big empty planets. I've seen some footage of this thing in action, and while it doesn't recreate the Mass Effect Mako physics 1-to-1, it does have its moments. Shattered Space comes at a time when many are revisiting Starfield 1 year later, only to discover that it's still Starfield, only now it has maps for the cities. Shattered Space drops for PC and Xbox and will no doubt be bundled with the PS5 version of the game when Bethesda inevitably announced that, because we all know that's on the way someday. Zoocosis is another one launching on September 30th. We actually profiled this on our Put This On Your Radar segment at the start of the year. This is the body cam horror game where you're a zookeeper trying to cure horribly mutated animals at night. Way too creepy for me, so please let me know in the comment section how it goes. And finally, we have Throne and Liberty, which is a new free-to-play MMORPG from NCSoft and Amazon Games. Austin will be checking this one out for us after he's finished with the latest World of Warcraft expansion, and he just did Guild Wars before that, so we've well and truly got him running on a giant MMO-fueled hamster wheel at this point. Word on the street is that Throne and Liberty is not great, so let's hope the street is wrong, otherwise Austin is in for a very rough 50 to 100 hours. Alright, a total change of gear here, and I mean that literally, so put this on your radar. This is Golden Lap, an F1 management game that's trying to take the stress out of a sport kind of famous for its stress. Think something like Mini Metro, only it's about the golden era of F1 racing in the 1970s. This comes from Fun Selector, who are already known for their unique takes on driving games. They made the beautiful Art of Rally and Absolute Drift, which really just focus on the joys of driving. It's a lovely and very different way to view motorsports, and it's just great this developer is delivering a fresh take on the genre. There was a really good reception for this one coming out of its Steam demo, and the game should have just come out by the time you're watching this. If it piques your interest at all, follow the link to our Steam Curator page down below where you can find it and all of the other games we profiled in this segment for your wish listing pleasure. Sort of free stuff time now, and right now you can still grab the lovely Toem as well as the ever so slightly darker The Last Stand Aftermath. Later this week, they'll both be replaced by The Spirit and the Mouse, which is the perfect game for you if you're sick of all these damn cat games. You play as a little French mouse with electric powers in what's supposed to be a heartfelt narrative adventure game. Seems like this one kind of flew under the radar a bit when it first came out in 2022, but Steam reviews have it at very positive, and you really can't say no at that price point. Wave 2 of September's Game Pass snuck in just as we locked down the show last week, but in case you're not already up to date, the games are all strategy focused. Wargroove 2 is an Advanced Wars style turn-based tactics game themed around pirates that got a good reception when it released. That's available for Xbox, PC, and cloud. Coming to PC Game Pass specifically is the excellent Frostpunk 2, which we just covered earlier in the show, as well as Ara History Untold. That's Microsoft's take on the Civilization genre, which is a risky bet, but worth a look if 4X games are your jam. There's some interesting twists happening with this one. Also, be sure to check out the most recent episode of the podcast, since we actually interviewed the dev team this past week. A really interesting chat about what sets Ara apart from games like Civ, as well as what it took to make this, since making grand strategy games is kind of a ball ache in more ways than one. The PS Plus October lineup was revealed during yesterday's State of Play, and it includes WWE 2K24, Doki Doki Literature Club, and if that's too horrific for you, then you can chase it down with Dead Space Remake. Dead Space alone making this month's offering pretty solid. Prime Gaming offerings are a tad slower this week, but that's coming off an absolutely massive month for the service. If you haven't picked up those Lord of the Rings games or the dozens of other titles they're bizarrely giving away, then be sure to take a look. Highlights for this week include Ghost Song, which is a great little atmospheric 2D game, as well as platformer Gianna Sisters Twisted Dreams, a 2D platformer which definitely has its cult fanatics. Finally, it's been a little while since Nintendo Switch Online got some new classics, but last week they added a handful of obscure SNES games. These include Battletoads, Double Dragon, Big Run, Cosmo Gang, The Puzzle, and the previously Japan-only game Kuryo-kun no Dodgeball Dayo Zen in Shugo, which pulled the characters from the game known as River City Ransom in the West and put them in an international dodgeball tournament. Ed says it's good, but word of warning, Ed is a sucker for obscure games that never got released outside of Japan, so he is an easy mark for this one. For our feel-good story for the week, we've noticed that people are really stepping up on the whole video game weddings thing this year. Earlier this year, there were 5 proposals and engagements at Pokemon Go Fest, all of which were witnessed by a person in a giant Eevee mascot suit, all couples who had met playing Pokemon Go. Jump forward to August, and a couple of Call of Duty content creators actually had their wedding ceremony during the Call of Duty Next event, which is essentially where they just show off the multiplayer for the first time. This wedding was even Black Ops themed, and the cake had crosshairs on it. And later this month at PAX Australia, Devolver Digital and the Cult of the Lamb developer Massive Monster are going to officially wed 2 couples during the convention at a Cult of the Lamb themed temple to be constructed at the show. And they'll be wed by the Lamb himself or herself, I don't know. If you're going to the convention, you can go and watch this live and celebrate with them. Look, I love video games, but if I think about it some more, I'd probably tap out at the stage where I get my wedding officiated by a giant cartoon video game mascot. Unless, of course, it was Sergeant Johnson from Halo. I reckon that dude would make a fucking awesome celebrant. He'd introduce the groom like this.
Usually the good Lord works in mysterious ways, but not today. This here is 66 tons of straight up HE spewing divine intervention. If God is love, then you can call me Cupid.
Alright nerds, that's me done. I know the Xbox Showcase will have aired by the time this is live, but we'll have to cover that one next week. It was a little bit hyped up by some people who claim to have some insider info, so here's hoping they're right. This State of Play was a pretty low bar to clear, so the ball's in your court, Phil. Don't let us down. I'm at TGS this week, so if you happen to be there, do stop me and say hello. If you're watching from afar, I appreciate you, and I'd love it if you could drop this video a like to give it a nice little nudge in the algorithm wars. Be sure to subscribe and ding that notification bell so we can come back and do this all again next week. A big thanks for watching, and a big thanks to this video's sponsor, SteelSeries. SteelSeries, if you've been around these parts before, you've probably seen them. Channel partner 3 years running, SteelSeries put out the absolute best PC peripherals on the market, full stop. Keyboards, headsets, mice, and more, whatever SteelSeries puts out, they aim to dominate that category, and they always manage to pull it off. Their range of keyboards is a perfect example. Their Apex lineup comes in a range of different form factors, from full size to mini, cable to wireless, with plenty of switch types to choose from as well. That lineup got a big boost yesterday when SteelSeries released the Apex Gen 3, the fastest, most responsive, and most customizable keyboard that money can buy. The Apex Gen 3 is so smart that it can detect which game you're playing and apply custom presets to it, which will automatically tweak the settings of your keyboard for maximum responsiveness for the keys that matter most, while reducing the actuation of other keys in case you accidentally press them. That's all possible thanks to SteelSeries' OmniPoint 3.0, the latest iteration of their proprietary tech that delivers fully customizable switches, allowing you to decide how responsive they are. OmniPoint 3.0 keys are 11 times faster to respond and 20 times faster to actuate than standard mechanical keys, meaning that if split-second key presses matter to you, nothing does it better than the Apex Gen 3. The build quality is also unmatched, with sound dampening foam for quieter clicks and the reliability you've come to expect from SteelSeries. It also looks great too, featuring a customizable display screen that can showcase a range of information at a glance, as well as per-key RGB, meaning you can get a look and effect that matches your setup. It's yet another example of SteelSeries staying at the absolute bleeding edge of peripheral technology, and that is why they have the reputation they do. The Apex Gen 3 is so new that it only came out yesterday. I think we're the very first channel doing an official shout out for it, so if you've been eyeing a keyboard upgrade, then now is the perfect time. Best of all, you can get a 12% discount on an Apex Gen 3 and anything else on the SteelSeries.com website when you use offer code SKILLUP at checkout. That's 12% off with offer code SKILLUP over at SteelSeries.com. Do get in quick because SteelSeries' new product launches always sell out in the first few days. Thanks SteelSeries for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.